Welcome to the Upcomers Podcast. My name is June Njete, and I am your host. The Upcomers Podcast is a podcast that explores opportunities for the youth and how to empower them. This can be through the areas of academics, whether it could be working on the ground, employment. And on this podcast, we explore these opportunities and give insight to the youth by interviewing people who have been there, who have experience, and who can give you the real, what's going on, what's on the ground, and inform the youth on how to get a head start. Today, my guest on the podcast is a woman who speaks for others. She's a woman who is a champion for women, for girls, for orphans. She calls herself a human rights activist, and she's very passionate about what she does. She also calls herself a politician. She's also been a contestant on the Miss President, where she did very well. And generally speaking, she's a woman who is so passionate. She speaks for good, she speaks with power, and she speaks for people who don't have a voice. My guest today is Shamalla Immaculate. Shamalla, karibu.
Asante.
Welcome to the Upcomers Podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being a guest today.
Asante.
So just to start, to get to know you a little bit better, and for those who are watching, how did you begin your journey as a human rights activist?
Great. My name is Shamalla Immaculate, and my journey was not by default, but I suppose the experience that we all face as teenagers, as children. You see things around you that really provoke you, that also ignite and spark something in you. Probably even in school when you're being beaten by, we used to be caned by our teachers. And I would ask my teacher, why are you caning me? Because I can understand if I've made a fault, but at least you don't have to cane me. Then there are things that would see. One is very key for me. There was a child who, we were in the village, and there was a child who people had surrounded, that small girl. And they were talking in my vernacular that the child has been hurt, sexually hurt, and they were just staring at her, and everybody was screaming. And I asked my mom, what is happening? My mom says, this child has been hurt by a man.
Yes.
And the man had been slapped a bit, and that's it, And then I asked mom, what will happen to this child? And they said, that's it, and then the villagers will have to have some rituals to be done, and that's finished. It really clicked in my mind.
Yeah.
So that's it, The child is hurt, her body has been hurt, emotionally, physically, and then what they'll do is just kill a goat, and the whole thing is finished.
Yeah.
It never left my mind. So I said, no, there's something. We have to speak to this, to speak for this child. And I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And that thing just kept in my mind, and maybe it's that's what shaped who I am today, to speak for people who do not have an opportunity to speak for themselves, or who probably the society through cultural barriers have made them not to speak whenever they're hurt.
So for you, it also sounds like it was also a traumatic experience for you, because it's something you saw firsthand, and it lasted in your mind. And going forth up until today, you still remember it, and it ignited something in you.
Yes, it did. It did. It just showed that somebody has to speak for somebody.
Yeah.
Somebody has just to give a shoulder for somebody. Somebody has to just give direction to a community. Somebody has to pump sense in a community.
Yeah. And so it's good that you actually talk about your mom and the rituals that followed the abuse of that child, because I wanted to know, what do you think, or what role do you feel that culture has? What role does it play in gender-based violence, and also leading up to early pregnancies and unwanted pregnancies? Gender-based violence is the umbrella of all forms of violence that is perpetrated to a particular gender, because it is perceived that gender is weak. And so gender-based violence is broad. We have physical violence, emotional violence, sexual violence. And in Kenya, and girls, adolescent girls, and also boys nowadays, the violence that they're going through is sexual, that leads them to probably early marriages. And then early marriages, it leads to domestic violence, because the lady probably, or the man, is not ready for responsibilities. Maybe they went into that institution by default.
And so it is important that our viewers understand that gender-based violence is broad.
Yeah.
But for this specific question you ask about sexual violence and the role of culture in addressing sexual violence.
Yes.
One is the African culture is very quiet and conservative on issues on sexual matters. They would rather keep quiet. We would rather keep quiet and say culturally it is wrong to speak about it. And that is how we've been socialized as a community, an African community, and that is why cases of sexual violence are underreported, because we do not know as a community how to engage and respond to sexual issues. That's one. And number two, that we also have a culture of silence, especially when it is happening within the confines of a family institution. Maybe it's the father or the brother or the uncle or the mother abusing their son. You find we keep quiet because it is something that is a family issue, family secret that should not be out there. So culturally we are socialized to be silent about it. And then lastly also, we live in a culture that somehow glorifies abuse. Yes, I would say that if a young man forcefully takes a girl, an adolescent girl, and marries her off, he's a hero, okay? But then in the legal framework or legal perspective, that is defilement.
Yeah.
But in cultural perspective, that man is a hero because he's been able to, like kidnap in a way, and then marry that girl, and then later is when the bride price will be paid. And so culture has perpetrated the culture of violence, and especially to the women and the girl.
So would you say that culture facilitates early marriages and domestic violence?
Yes.
Because from what you said, basically if a girl gets raped, then the wazers come together and say, because you raped this girl, maybe now she's pregnant.
Yes.
You need to take her as a wife.
Yes.
And when she gets into this marriage, and because of how she got into the marriage, it just becomes a cycle of domestic violence.
Yes.
So she has the baby,
Yes.
she's home, she's being beaten,
Yes.
maybe she gets the next baby,
Correct.
and she's struggling. She doesn't have a way of getting out of this now.
Correct. Correct.
And how do you feel like, you as a woman, and already you live in Mashinani, you're from Kitale,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So you interact with the villagers, the people, the wazes, the chamas for Wamama on a daily. How do you feel, someone like you in your position, as a human rights activist and also a champion for the girls, for the women, how do you feel someone like you're educated on these matters, yes, you're a woman, you understand tradition, how do you feel you can actually impact them or influence them to create, different norms around how they treat these women, yeah? Or more so just to say, how do you remove that stigma, and how do you actually, bring out sex, as a topic that is not taboo, so that it can actually be taught, be explained, right, without, bringing shame, even within the family confine, or, as women, and even as men, they can sit down and discuss, this is what happened, ABCD, without, the father feeling shameful, or, just so that we can progress and give these women a chance. Yeah.
I would like to say so much has been done, and we have to appreciate we've come from somewhere.
Yeah.
We didn't have the law. We have the Sexual Offences Act now that clearly and explicitly pronounces itself on issues of sexual violence. We didn't have the legislation or any law in terms of female genital mutilation, but we do have now the prohibition against female genital mutilation. That was enacted in 2011, I think. We have the domestic violence bill that also speaks about violence. So in terms of legal mechanisms that can intervene on cases on violence against not only women and girls, but also boys nowadays,
Yes.
we have legislations. But now we do not have budgets that can also speak to those legislations. You can say budgets in terms of addressing civic education, Because when people understand their roles and responsibilities, but more so their rights, it is easier for them to respect each other. When they know that there is a law that curtails or sanctions people who probably might be tempted or vulnerable to hurt young girls and young boys, it can deter them, because laws are there to deter vices. So we don't have budgets as a country that can ensure we have civic education, public awareness, for the public to understand this is good, this is bad, and if this happens, there are consequences. It really heartbreaks me, and breaks my heart though, that you see a young girl, a young boy of 18 years, he's been arrested, charged with defilement, and then sentenced for 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
So now he'll stay in the prison for close to 20 years. All his life is finished. His youthful is finished. When he comes out, there's stigma. Nobody will want to appreciate him or even employ him.
Yeah.
Right? And so his life is finished. It's because he did not know that there is a law that says you cannot have sex with even your girlfriend if she's an underage. He didn't.
Yeah.
You know? He did, because nobody told him. And so that's why culture is very important, whereby we used to have our aunties and uncles talk to us and socialize us on how we need to behave as girls and boys. Not to fear each other, but to respect each other. I remember my aunties would take us to the river, and we would take a bath at a certain time, exactly at 2 to 3. Then 4 to 5, the men come and bathe. So there was no way we would meet.
Yeah.
There was no way we would even see each other. There was respect. And we would know that at 4 to 5, you don't go to the river, because the men now are bathing.
Yeah.
Right? We used to have some cushions and some parameters of how to behave. We used to have responsive systems, uncles, aunties, rite of passage. I remember our rite of passage from where I come from. They would tell the young men that you don't knock on doors that have been knocked. You know? It clearly says you cannot have affair with a married woman.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we had some systems that really responded to issues on sex. But somehow we have adopted a foreign culture that is not ours. It is very singular. It is very like closed in, conservative. It's me, myself, and my family. The extended families have been cut off. And extended families were the systems that passed on culture, good values, beliefs, and systems that helped us to grow into ideal people. And so culture, as you look at it, could be also a bad thing, but also there was good culture that we Africans have not passed to you, the generation that is there. And so now you're tapping yourself, you're adapting different cultures to be your culture.
That's
and so
true.
I ask myself, where are we? Where is the church? Where is the government? Where are the elders? You know, where are the women that who holistically build a child? Remember, we used to say a child is for the community. Nowadays, huyo ni mtoto wangu, usimguse.
Now, aside from culture, we can also look at the fact that there's poverty, which I feel has greatly contributed to early marriages, unwanted pregnancies, and I wanted to know, what are your thoughts? Why do you think these unwanted pregnancies are prevalent in Western Kenya and in the coast? Because yes, of course, those cases are also in Nairobi, in all counties. We can't ignore that it's happening in the north, everywhere. But you'll find, like, when you're reading the paper, the media has highlighted these cases are very high in coast. Maybe there were, majority of the girls, either they dropped out just before their KCP. You'll find several girls in Western Kenya. They're now, all, pregnant or, a case or other. And I remember this politician, a female politician from ODM, was on radio, and she said, you men, like, don't harass our girls in their uniform. Get your wives to put on the uniforms and, take that up. Leave the girls alone. They need to study. They need to be in school and finish their education. And it was, again, being addressed in Western Kenya. So you now as a woman and being from Kitale, how do you feel the youth in Kitale, can advocate for better practices just to eradicate this or at least curb it? And what role do you feel like poverty is playing, and how as a youth we can come together and say, okay, yes, there's poverty, but we can do ABCD, we can try, and then now the county can come into play and also take a stand there.
The conversation is key, that culture plays a big role in issues on sex and sexual violence. But again, we've said culture is dynamic. It keep changing. It's not static. How to challenge the youth of Kenya to also come up with their culture, a culture of respect, a culture of love, a culture of peace, and a culture of equality. And it's possible, because like seeing you here seated with me and talking about these issues passionately, it gives me hope that the youth are taking charge of their lives, and saying, we can start a new culture that does not always it's negative about the youth of Kenya. It's either they're raping, it's either they're killing, it's either drugs. And so we need to have a conversation among the youth and maybe our generation and the other generation. I always say intergeneration dialogue is important. That let the youth and the elders have a conversation so that they can understand each other and probably agree on how they can live in this society called Kenya. I see a lot of discussions of youth versus youth. So what are they talking to each other? What are they saying? What are they telling each other that is new? Probably tap on the resource of indigenous and native knowledge that has not been tapped. I urge you and your platforms that let the youth have discussions with other generations so that we can tap knowledge, and also we can pass on better systems of beliefs and values that can assist the youth. That's one. Number two, I would like also to say that it is bad to just condemn the youth. You see, as you said very well, poverty, economic disempowerment is one of the issues that also have made the youth probably fall into so many things. I come from an area where I'm a board chair of a certain school that I might not say it, but our school is in a slum, and there's a lot of teen pregnancy. And my girls are affected because one, they are mothers. Two, it's single-headed households. They're the ones who take care of their siblings because their mother left, their father left. So they are basically the parents of their siblings. Now she's coming to school, she has to go home and fend for her siblings who also are coming from school or probably have left school and they're going to beg in the streets. Now what can she do? The whole 12 hours she's been in school, she goes home in the evening. Where will she get food? Where will she get anything to exist? So what does she do? She goes for the easier way. She goes to sell herself so that she can feed her children. Her children in a way. But it is her siblings. Now, we ask ourselves why? Where is the mother? Divorced, went to marry another person because she got married when she was young. Now she's found herself in a marriage that is not working. She's saying she's going to get married to another man who can take care of her, leaving the girl to take care of the children. And so that poverty is number one also. It contributes to sexual violence. I'm afraid to talk about politicians and making very funny utterances, because as a politician and as a leader, you need to talk positive vibe. You need to tell us, you need to advocate, you need to rally something that can bring some influence and impact to the society. And so telling a wife that you need to, and I think I know that politician, that dress your wife in the school, attire, it is wrong. So are you trying to say that girls should be, the girls are being raped because they are in school uniform? That's not the way it is. We have legislations. Why are those legislations not working? Right? It's because of probably poverty. Address poverty. These children who are single-headed mothers in their homes, provide for them. Right? Schools should provide, like in my school, we just provide free lunch so that they can be able to eat, and then whatever remains they can take at home, so that they do not have to steal or to sell themselves to feed. We also try and go out there and beg for sanitary towels so that they can be able to have sanitary towels instead of selling themselves to border so that they can buy these sanitary towels. But that's not our responsibility. It's the government's responsibility. So poverty is an issue when we are addressing sexual gender-based violence.
Just from, your response, I've gathered that maybe what we call the prevalence of rape taking place in coast or these unwanted pregnancies taking place in Western, it's not really a matter of, it's a culture within these communities.
Yes.
But it could be that these communities are now tired.
Yes.
They're saying, we're done with this. It's been taking place for so long and we're going to speak up about it. Because you'll hear more coverage about it on the radio, you'll hear coverage about it on the news, it's in the paper, and they highlight these areas. Just because the way you're saying, people are not hiding anymore in their homes. Mothers are now going to the police station, they're going to the chief, they're going to the next head and saying, this is taking place, what are you doing about it? And so that's why now the cases seem to be coming more from these areas, yeah?
Exactly, absolutely.
And going forward, I feel like, what role do you feel like the media can play in not just highlighting, these cases, because it seems like it stops on paper.
Yep.
You get?
Yep.
As much as, media is supposed to communicate, but what influence do you feel like that communication should have even on our leadership? Because it shouldn't just be like, I'm writing a story, I'm saying this is happening. But what else can be done? Just, from, what can the media do? How can they take it up? And then our leaders come in. Where do they come in now?
I want to thank the media for just highlighting first. It has helped to somehow break the culture of silence. That people know they can speak for themselves. That people know they should not just keep quiet. That people know they should not be compromised in such cases. And I'm happy that the media has amplified. And also it has created the anger in Kenyans to say, listen, this issue is becoming a cultural issue. Not cultural in the sense of traditions, but a culture of rape in Kenya. We must stop it. So that anger is good because it provokes action.
Yeah.
I'm glad about it. And I'm also glad that the children nowadays also know that if it happens to me, I need to go to the hospital, or if it happens to my friend, I report to the teacher. So at least reporting mechanisms have been somehow entrenched in our systems, we kind of know. But we still have some parents who are being compromised. They're being paid for silence, We still have that. But just the media amplifying the issue of sexual violence, I can say it's good. But then we need now to look at the action part, right?
Yeah.
Once you have reported, what have other institutions done, right? We need to keenly look at the judiciary. Are the courts listening to these cases? Are these cases being expedited at a kind of, not a fast pace, but adequate time? Do we have fair trials? Do we have fair justice systems for both the survivor and the perpetrator? And so let us now go to the courts, because access to justice is in the judiciary. Yeah. Let's go to the judiciary and look at how many cases are in a year and how many cases of rape are being had.
Yes.
And then is everybody being given a fair trial? Are their rights being protected, right? Do they say this when the cases are had? Are they had privately or publicly? Are there, their personal dignity respected, right? Then we go to the police. How do they handle children matters, right? Do they take them keenly, sensitively? If it is a boy who has been abused, when they're reporting, who hears that? Who takes the report? Is it a female? Because if it's a female, it's wrong. It should be male to male, female to female. So we need to look at the police. Do they have enough budget to address gender-based violence? When it happens, do they have fuel to go and arrest the perpetrator? Or they ask the victim to provide for fuel so that they can go and arrest? So yes, the media has to go and look at the systems that are in place to address intervene gender-based violence. We have to go and look at, it has also to, the media has to go and look at the church. What is the church speaking about sexual gender-based violence? What is its stand about sex and sex education, right? The media has to give us positive vibe that there was a case that happened, the girl reported, the parents took it up, they went to the police, they took all the legal measures, the case is before court, and it has been determined. It gives precedence to the community to know it is doable to report a case, and the case is determined legally. I'm not advocating for the youth to be arrested. I'm not advocating for the youth to be jailed, but I'm advocating, saying that if there is an issue, let the legal mechanisms take course, right? Yeah. It's not fair for people to be in jail. I've said that before. But that is the approach that we need to, the media needs to highlight so that people can believe in the justice system.
Yeah.
Because people are not believing in the justice system. So let the media now, showcase that the justice system works. And then the media should go and look at the budgets at the county level. What are our budgets? Do the budgets speak to issues that affect Mwananchi? Do the budgets speak about youth-friendly centers that offer services in terms of, voluntary counseling and testing, such things? Are these budgets youth responsive? Are these budgets giving youth opportunities so that they cannot be idle and then they can do other things so that they are not caught up or vulnerable to sexual violence, right? And so the media has to interrogate how our legislators, how our leaders are making budgets. Are they pro-youth friendly? It really makes me sad that our budgets are more on security, police, the army, How I'd wish our budgets were more on the youth, investing in the youth, on innovations, The people who have so much good ideas, how can we harness these ideas into reality that can bring employment? Because once there's employment, the youth will not be idle, the youth will not do drugs, the youth will not abuse, the youth will not go rape children, defile children. And so the media should start looking at not more reporting, but are these systems responsive? And are these systems able to prevent the culture of rape in Kenya?
Now, Shamalla, based on what you've said, I've had the youth and the wrongdoings of the youth are very much amplified, but I feel like maybe we're being castigated because there are also other parties that play here, and these are probably the old men who sit at home, those who are out of work, the drunkards who just, who lay about, who also take advantage of these girls and the young boys, because maybe you just sit here, you sit at home, you just talk stories and you mark routes, so where, the kids go to school, they come back home at what time. And so I feel like now these are the people who are protected by culture, because it's easier to blame the youth, to blame the young person and say they're not being raised well, they're not behaving well because they're adopting, foreign culture. But going forward, because you are a politician, do you feel like you could vie for a seat again in Trans Nzoia County just to impact and influence, your people, the people of Trans Nzoia, to get the outcomes that we all desire as Kenyans?
They say once a politician, always a politician, right? And I got myself there because I needed to advocate for such issues you're raising. I have a great passion for the youth. I believe in the youth. And for me, I even say we need to have drastic legal measures of saying it is a must we employ or create opportunities for these youth because they have very eccentric, authentic, creative and noble ideas that if you can take them very seriously, they build a very big web of diversity in terms of application, thought process. And so I contested because I believe that there's a gap in terms of advocacy, people advocating, to have advocates in the parliament to advocate for justice and justice systems to work. So once a politician, they say always a politician, right? So I don't, I'm not shy to say yes, the people of Trans Nzoia, I'm listening to them. I'm listening to what they're saying. They want me to, again, come forward and see if I'll be voted. But I'm telling them, I'm challenging them that keep the conversation. Tell me what needs to be done. but I'm here to serve. And I'll continue serving the people of Trans Nzoia, because I believe, not only Trans Nzoia, the whole world, that if there is respect for human rights, then we will have justice, we will have equality, and we will have peace. There'll never be peace if there's no justice. And so I even tell the peace crusaders, you're doing a lot of peace work, but unless you now look at the approach of justice, is when we'll have peace. Because if you give me my justice, or there's justice in how you approach things, you know, opportunities are just, then I will be at peace. I will not want to rob you, because really there is peace and calmness. And so yes, 2022 come, but you see there's a referendum. We don't know if there's going to be some of these seats, because Kenyans are saying they might be scrapped or whatever. So let's see how the referendum comes out. We are scanning the political environment, and when the time comes, we will face Kenyans, we will face the people of Trans Nzoia and say, this is our agenda. We are issue-based politicians. The actions we want are this, that, and this. Yes.
Shamalla, thank you, because you just didn't give us your 2 cents. You gave us much more. You gave us your experience. You really went deep into it. And I feel like, because you know what this podcast talks about, we talk about the youth. And you've really talked about what we can do. And so as a youth, I'd like to challenge the youth going forward that let's not just wait for jobs. Let's not blame, you know, our leaders. Let's not take it to social media, because at the end of the day, social media will remain social media. You might not do much. You might cause something to go viral, you know. But what are you actually doing about it? What's being done on the ground? And how are you participating? How are you actually working towards, you know, a better future in your community? So for me, I feel like this has really opened up, you know, at least given me knowledge on how youth can actually work more towards, you know, just curbing such issues that are taking place in our society, as girls, as women, as men, as, you know, as young men, as boys as well. How, you know, how we can actually do something about it. And by using the legal channels, by using community-based organizations, forming our own, and also, you know, just garnering up our own, you know, dialogues, chamas, talk about these things. And I just want to thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
And it's lovely having you on, and going forward, I just want to say all the best.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for hosting me, you know. You were kind of calm, and you gave me that, you know, energy to just talk about it, because talking about it is important. Let us have the conversation, and I'm glad it's being driven by the youth.
Yeah.
And that is the way it should be. Let youth have that conversation.
Yeah.
And I know the solution will be found.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Asante
Karibu
sana. Thank
again.
you. All right.